Are you going to start us off then, or you want me to? I was just going to announce that it's not official. I mean, we're not going to convene or adjourn. Just
Good evening, everyone. This is Brett Provenzano, Superintendent of the Fairport Central School District. I'm here with our Fairport Central School District Board of Education. This is a budget meeting where we focus on the budget and reach out to the community. This is an important meeting for our Board of Education. It's one of the several ways that we get information from school members, community members. When we create a budget, we can do our best to make sure all voices are heard. This is an annual event. There'll be important dates coming up in the near future, so please stand by for those. But I want to introduce our board president, Mr. Peter Forsgren.
Wow, bad timing. Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm glad for those who are here, but we know it's being streamed and comments are on. And this isn't a formal board meeting in terms of we're not going to convene or adjourn. It's, we've allotted an hour, but it can be shorter, right around roughly that time as well, just depending on the input. But we have some things just to present at a high level, right? Just thought exchange information, and then it's open for some Q&A specific to the budget, right? And or just what people here have as priority. We think we have a sense of that a little bit from the thought exchanges and surveys, but we're here to listen.
Yep, go for it.
I clicked on the YouTube and it says comments are off.
Yeah, comments need to be on for this session, and that's weird. I was just going to say that. We do have a Q&A.
They're on now?
They're on now? Perfect. Yep, and we want to make sure that if there are questions that our community members have, we could do our best to try to answer them, but sometimes it takes us, we need some research, it takes us time because we need to do some research, but we'll definitely be posting the questions and answers by the end of this week to this forum. So,
Yeah, it says it's off when I went there.
Oh,
just
I'm
now.
typing comments in.
Are you? Okay. I like to
Why does
see them.
Eric have special privileges?
Oh, Erica, I do see your comments. They're just off for me. They're off for you.
They're all for me.
Okay. So what do you have for us, Brett? Or Mr. Provenzano?
well, that's fine. I'm Brett too. So I would say that the budget tells a story, and this Board of Education, as I'm finishing my 7th year, has made it a priority to get these budget goals and priorities out. The budget speaks to our priorities around educational programming. How do we create a program that meets the wide range of needs of our students so we can give them the very best? Fiscal sustainability, part of any quality budget process, is this commitment to making sure that we're spending our dollars wisely with transparency, that we're, managing our reserves, because we know that our reserves help offset the cost of future projects and initiatives and goals of the district. Facilities planning has been a priority of this Board of Education since I've been on the board. Dollars have been I've not been on the board, that I've worked with this board, sorry. That each year, dollars have been allocated in our general fund to support facilities maintenance and upkeep. That has been a community priority as we have talked about for the past several years, and I'm proud that the board's invested in our facilities. And this one is exciting and new, intentional. It's not new, but it's highly intentional. This board has made it a priority this year to talk about conservation and sustainability. Not just talk about it, but have action steps towards nurturing and our natural resources and gaining intentional efforts to support conservation and sustainability.
And just to jump in there.
Yeah, please do.
It became that partly because of the advocacy of our students, right? I mean, they came to a workshop, they advocated well, but it's even over the years as we've visited schools, we've seen the clubs and we've seen the efforts in the different schools to try and be more conservation-minded, sustainability-minded. It's evidence that our students are taking this very seriously, and from the studies, they recognize that they don't have a lot of confidence in the adults, and so this became a way for us to work with our students. We are an educational institution for them, and I thought it worked well since they were advocating so strongly.
Board, you make my job easy. You have one expectation, one very important expectation is you say listen and engage with your stakeholders. And this is an example of that. Facilities planning is an example of that. Making sure that we have educational programming that's expansive and that meets the needs of our students is an indicator of that as well. So thank you for prioritizing and listening and building budgets that tell our Fairport story. Mr. Stevens is now going to share a little overview. Mr. Stevens, Matt Stevens, is our Assistant Superintendent of Business, and he's going to talk a little bit about the governor's executive budget proposal.
Okay, good evening, and thank you, Mr. Provenzano. Again, here's the governor's executive budget proposal as it relates to school aid and aid to education. Overall, it's a proposed increase of $2 billion, which is a little over 7% for the 22-23 school year. And a couple of the big highlights, a bulk of the money is related to foundation aid. This will be the second year of a 3-year planned phase-in to fully fund foundation aid for school districts. So that's a $1.6 billion increase out of that $2 billion overall increase to education. It'll be funded for school districts in terms of if school districts will receive the larger half of any foundation aid that's due according to the phase-in formula, or they'll receive a 3% increase over the 21-22 foundation aid. They'll get the larger of each of those. For our district, that larger number is $2.6 million of an increase in state aid for the foundation aid. Again, the foundation aid is our largest operating aid in the school district, accounts for approximately 60% of our overall state aid as a whole. And part of that phase-in would assume that the school district will receive that other half of $2.6 million in the 23-24 school year. So that's part of the planned phase-in overall for the 50% remaining in 22-23 and then again in 23-24. Expense-based aids, those are aids that are generated for school districts based on expenses in the current school year funded in the following school year. So a couple of the larger pieces of expense-based aids are transportation, BOCES, building aid, and so forth. The proposal here in the governor's proposal is to fully fund the expense-based aid. So fund based on the formula that exists, which is good news. Overall for Fairport, that's about a $127,000 decrease for next year. It fluctuates between the expenses, so there may be an increase in transportation aid, but a decrease in building or BOCES aid in those pieces. So overall, the proposal to fully fund is the key piece here, which is important and beneficial for schools. And then the exact amount of aid that we'll receive in next school year will depend on our final expenses in the current school year. So those are the highlights of the aid to education for schools.
This will evolve. We'll be able to narrow these numbers in the scope of this budget and the impact that this budget has. But we really appreciate, this initial phase of the executive budget proposal as we build our budget. We also, again, as we build a budget, have the expectation to hear from many different community members. We ask our community members to consider the most important things to them as we begin to plan for our school budget. This went to our families in Fairport who had children in our schools. There were close to 500 or 499 participants to be exact, 603 thoughts, and over 30,000 ratings of those thoughts. That's pretty significant. I'm always impressed with the level of engagement and expectation that our community has to have a voice. This survey will be shared in full on Friday, so people can dig into it. I'm going to be just giving a survey of what we learned, but the complete survey in its entirety will be available online. We had 73% of our parents and guardians complete this survey, and 22% were staff. So there was a range. Some community members also were able to participate in it with the link. And again, the themes are familiar. There really weren't any surprises, and we're trying to build a budget that focuses on maintaining high-quality class sizes so students and staff can interact in a positive fashion where connections can be a priority, addressing the unique needs of our students. Employee salary, and I think there's been a theme, which is really interesting, that our community as a whole appreciates our staff. And this just wasn't one subset. This was multiple staff unit members, from our bus drivers to our teachers to our buildings and grounds, our food service, and so on. So it was really nice to see that acknowledgement. Mental health always comes in strong. I really appreciate our community. I appreciate our board, where we've invested resources into our mental health and making sure that we're taking care of the heart before we get to the learning, and making sure that our environment is always conducive to learning, caring, and sharing as we prepare to support our students. And you could see, again, the top-rated themes, in this chart. I'll be reviewing some of these, the key thoughts. Again,
Mr. Provenzano? Sorry, there's just a question for Mr. Stevens about what you had gone over, about the expense, why the decrease in expense-based aids for Mr. Button.
Yeah, again, primarily, like I mentioned, you may have fluctuations in what we spend in current year for transportation, BOCES. Building aid is actually aided based on debt service and projects and assumed debt service payments. So what it works out for Fairport is while there might be an increase projected in transportation aid, there's actually decreases projected in building aid and BOCES aid based on expenses. Yep.
so
There's some
again,
debt dropping off, which means an aid payment will in turn drop off. The key to that is also on the expense side of the budget. For debt service, there'll be a decrease in debt service. So that aid payment that may fall on the revenue side of the budget for building aid actually drops off as an expense for debt service on the expense side of the budget.
Thank you so much, and I think it works really well. Please, if you want to interject or get a clarifying question, that's so helpful. So these questions will be posted. The answers will be posted as well. Thank you, Mr. Stevens, for being able to address that. And again, just as we look at our key thoughts from the thought exchange, educational program, our community expects extracurricular activities, co-curricular activities, an elective program that supports the wide range of interest and needs of our students as they go through Fairport schools and Fairport High School. And again, the expectation about honoring our employees' work continues to be a theme in our thought exchange. Here are some of the comments regarding mental health. People see that as a priority. In fact, that there's always a need for more because of the range of needs. But again, that just speaks to us as an organization to focus on mental health and making sure that we're doing all we can to provide services and programs that connect our students to greater experiences and networks. More celebration of our staff. Teachers have done an amazing job of connecting with our students, the whole online learning experience, the hybrid learning experience, transitioning back to full-time school has been well noted and received by our community. There's a high level of pride in our schools. The programming in our schools, once again, is unique, and we boast over 80 to 90 electives that our students take in full sections. And I think our community expects that and sees it as a source of enrichment and opportunity for students to develop themselves. So we're proud of that, and we'll be talking more about that through the budget season, and our community agrees. This slide is always interesting, and I'm not going to read it verbatim, but it speaks to the differences where people are seeing masking is a very important conversation. There was lots of thoughts and ratings on it. And then you have the opposite side, all voices matter, and it's worth mentioning that all voices matter, even though those opposite thoughts didn't receive high ratings, right? So all the thoughts that weren't rated high, these were the highest rated ones. So it shows you the polar opposites. And that is represented in this slide right here. But what's common, which is great, and it speaks to our Fairport community, again, that they believe in our programming. They believe that the programming that we institute, K, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, tells a story. It helps students engage and find the very best experiences in our schools. I like this one, real world experiences, right? How do we make our learning experiences authentic? As we build our strategic plan, we talk about, student life and student opportunities. I hope that this will be highlighted and seen as an investment moving forward. Facilities, I am proud of this one. High expectations for our facilities, our community as a whole. There were high ratings that we need to continue to have maintenance and upkeep of our facilities. We've had renovation projects going on the past several years. We're going to be talking more about the potential for another bond referendum vote as we move forward. The board has been talking about it not only in business meetings, but more in detail during workshops. And you see on the other side of that, there are community members who feel, again, those thoughts are not rated as high or as frequent, but they're still thoughts. But there's community members who think that we just need to focus on our academics and our programming, which we respect, and we hear those voices. So I just want to stop there before I go into important dates, but do we have any questions from our community or any thoughts? We have some friends out here. There's a podium with a microphone. If you feel as if you want to share your thoughts and comments, by all means. Is that? Yep. Sorry, you should have.
And there's just a little button on the microphone. Yep, and it should turn green.
Now it's green.
You got it?
I think so. My name's Jillian Button. I have a student in Fairport currently. He's in kindergarten. I'm also a alum here. Haven't been in this room in a while. I had questions regarding, and I don't know if it'll be brought into more detail of the draft of the budget and whatnot regarding special education funding. I've been told that my son's program is being cut for the following year. He'll be going to first grade, him and some other students, and we have concerns and are just curious. I guess that's why I was curious as well about the expense-based, but it seems the expense-based is just lower because there was less expenses, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
And it's also looked at on a budget-to-budget basis. So then when actuals come in the current year, if those were under budget, we adjust to be sure that we're budgeting properly for the next year.
Sure.
Another piece of expense-based aid, just to highlight, we do get aid for private and excess cost aid, which is an expense-based aid also, and that's based on what we spend related to students with special needs within the district and at BOCES or private placements. So that's another expense-based aid too.
So,
Okay.
but to get to the crux of your question.
Sure.
And it wasn't a matter of budget. That particular, I think, conversation, and we can go offline and have a
Sure.
personal conversation respectfully. We're
Yeah.
honored to serve all of our students, and we want to do that to the highest extent. If we're in a situation where we can't meet individual needs based upon the extent of needs and
Right.
what we're able to do as a school district, that might impact the level of programming. So I'd be happy to talk offline and
Sure,
connect
yeah,
you.
I just was curious. I came tonight to be curious of what funding for special needs in general
This is
was,
not a
so.
budget, that's not a budgetary decision. That's us being able to do our best for children.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Would that be covered more at the March 22nd, the instructional budget hearing, if you're interested in like specific line items?
Well, yeah, that particular, if you want to
The
look at those
line-
line items, thank
line
you.
items.
Dr. White, yep. Yeah, but again, please, if you want to talk more about that particular circumstance, we'd be happy to do so.
No other questions online, but the mic's still open for anybody else in the room, but as was mentioned, in case there was confusion, we're not presenting any budget tonight. It is to hear, and then the dates you see up on the screen is when we'll start getting budget numbers out there, and then those still are not final, right? At the March 22nd, for example, we will, those will be presented. We know more comments will come back after that, and adjustments, if any, will be made, and that's what's getting close on the 12th.
So do you want me to jump in? I'll go over the dates here.
Yeah, Mr. Stevens is
Yep.
going to go over the dates, I'm sorry.
Yep, thank you. So the future dates for budget planning for the district, on the 15th, we'll be presenting the non-instructional budget presentation, and that involves a lot of our supports from central office to buildings and grounds, transportation, our benefits, debt service, payments that we have as a district. So that's the piece on the non-instructional budget. March 22nd will be the instructional budget presentation draft, the revenue, as well as draft one of the full budget. So the revenue support, that supports the expense side of the budget. That's March 22nd. April 12th is the final proposed budget and board a date in which the budget will be recommended for adoption. That is, these dates all align with the state's requirements to meet deadlines and timelines for the budget process. May 3rd would be the public hearing on the proposed budget. May 4th, meet the candidates for board candidates. May 17th is the third Tuesday in May, which is the statewide annual budget vote and board elections, and that's held at Joanna Perrin Middle School throughout the entire day from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And those are the dates as we progress through the process.
I'd also like to remind community members that the survey will be posted on our website, and I'll be sharing it in my weekly update. So again, you could dig into the thought exchange further. If you have questions, we'll make sure that you have access to emails or other ways to communicate with the administrative team.
Managing expectations. We have a different governor. Typically, we didn't know the state aid revenues for sure until right around April 1st when the state budget's there. We may know earlier. I don't know that for sure. I just don't think it looks as to be as contentious as it has been in the past between the legislature and the governor. So for the community, we may actually have some really good numbers on by March 22nd, or else we'll, at the latest, typically April 1st for the revenue side. But we'll already have a good idea, I think, based on what's been put out there. It seems to be quite popular, and looking forward to what that means for us as a district. If there's nothing else, then we don't have to keep people here longer than needed, right? We appreciate you coming out tonight, and we're always reachable via email as well as board members. So.
Thank you. Have a good evening.